So good afternoon to everybody from Stefano Carrara here in Milan. The webinar is about to start. Let me take some few minutes, very few minutes, in order to let every participant join our works of today, which, as we will see in a minute, have a very interesting topic, and also we have a very welcomed and exceptional expert trying to help us understanding the issues. So I see that people are connecting, and I will wait some more seconds, and then Stefania will come to you in a while. Just let everybody the chance to connect. I don't know in France, but in Italy at the university we have this quarter of hour of academic delay, which is concedes to professors. So if lesson is supposed to start at 4, then you can wait until 4:15. I don't know whether it's the same in France, but
yes, it's the same. It's the same. We even call it the politeness quarter. You know, if you're invited and you arrive 15 minutes late, then that's fine. That's not late.
yeah, then that's fine. And let me give some preliminary information, which I will remind afterwards. Also, this webinar, of course, it's in English, and it is recorded, so it will be freely available to anybody. We will take care of delivering and sharing the link, as well as the material, which can be freely downloaded, and everybody will be free to share on social media both contents and the recording of the webinar. So 2 minutes has gone by, so I will start, and then I'm sure that much person will join late in the webinar. So first of all, welcome. I'm Stefano Carrara, and I am the CEO of Linus. Just 2 words very quick on our company. We are a Milan-based company, and we are a fintech company. We develop a platform which has been on the market for 10 years, and the platform is a platform used by experts in corporate finance, so banks, private equity funds, CFO, everyone that deals with finance, credit manager. We are not a business information supplier, just to make it clear from the very beginning. And the platform is used to support many processes in the banking industry, M&A industry, etc., etc. So I'm not here to talk about Linus today, but I'm here to talk about Open Data Directive 138, and I have the pleasure to do it with Stephanie. So I invite you, Stephanie, and thank you very much for being here, for having accepted our invitation to introduce yourself. You might eventually talk about FEBIS and your a relation, and why are you an expert on this new regulatory act, which will be deep diving in the next minutes.
Yes, well, thank you very much for the invitation, Stefano. It's always very good to be talking about that and to be explaining what we do. So my name is Stéphanie Verilac-Marzin, and I'm the Institutional and Regulatory Affairs Coordinator at FEBIS. I will explain just in a moment when we start the presentation what FEBIS is, but FEBIS is the Federation of Business Information Providers. And I've been working with FEBIS for quite some time now. My background is in European law. I have had preliminary expertise at the European Parliament and also in the Commission. And I've been working on the set of EU issues related to data for more than 15 years now. So at the time when digitalization was so big an issue, and now we see that it's really kicking in. And So FIBIS, as I said, FIBIS is the Federation of Business Information Services. And well, FIBIS is an old federation because it was founded in 1973. So you see now that we're going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the FIBIS Federation this year. And by the way, there's going to be a special event at the general meeting in Hamburg in September. So I invite those of you who are close to FIBIS to stay tuned on that. So it's an international federation. The mission statement and the basic mission of FIBIS is really to promote the business information industry and to support the interest and the needs, traditional role of the business federation. But one of the key points maybe is to explain what is business information, because it's a very large term and it can encompass a lot of things. So we focus on B2B trade relations and transaction, and with a risk-based analysis. So the idea is to focus on credit, on risk, and also on marketing intelligence services, and to enable companies to better assess their credit risk or their marketing services, and to have a clear picture about their suppliers and their clients, and to therefore have a business transaction in a secured environment, let's say. So the range of issues that FIBIS members are following is very vast, because it goes from data to security, to anti-money laundering, to enabling better digital identities checks. So this is really a huge aspect. But the baseline, so to say, is helping companies secure their trade counterparts and facilitate their commercial transactions. So this is the baseline. And as such, well, we have developed a lot of key items and focus. So as I said, identifying the key risks. So the risk related to trade or credit, but also to compliance, and know your customer or know your businesses. So KYB. The fight against fraud, this is becoming more and more important, because we all know about the development in the anti-money laundering legislation, and the fact that fraud has various faces, let's say. So it's important when you trade at international level to make sure that you do so with secured counterparts. And of course, the objectives of FIBIS are also to promote the business information sector, and to have a key point on the legitimate interest of the business information sector in accessing key data, and in being able to use the data to provide value-added services and products to their final clients and counterparts. And last but not least, though FIBIS primarily remit is European, we also have members outside of Europe. So the view is really large. Okay.
Yeah, okay, and I think this is quite necessary today, because we have different bodies taking part into the sector at any level, and we really need some type of integration and common management. Let me do one very rapid thing, Stephanie. After you perfectly introduced FABIS, and by the way, my greetings to Silvia Maral, which is president of FABIS. Maybe she's listening. Ciao, Silvia. Which is before deep diving into the directive. Let me launch a brief survey which should appear on screen. So the question is, have you already heard about the Open Data Directive before today? So I kindly ask participants to select one of the two options they have on screen, so that we can check it. Answers are coming in.
Mhm.
Okay, I think it's done.
Yeah.
Now I think everybody can see the result. We have 80% of participants that have already heard about the directive, while we have 20% who didn't, and that's curious, but not that much, because I'm still very surprised, Stephanie, that not everybody in every nation knows about this regulatory issue, because it could be a very large impact. So let me
Mm.
proceed, and let's go on, if it's okay for you, with
Yeah.
the presentation. Let me just add that everybody is free to ask some questions, and in order to do so, you should use the option domande, which means questions in Italian, in
Mhm.
your presentation. We could be able to take in real time your questions. If we can do so, very happy. Otherwise, you will probably receive a delayed answer, maybe today or in the next day. So please, Stephanie, go on.
Yeah, yeah, of course, feel free to interact. And as you were saying, I mean, we are always happy to get questions in the flow, because sometimes it can be easier to answer right away. So yes, so coming back to Phoebus, and I'll do that really quick. But the four pillars are around networking, representing, monitoring, and protecting. So networking, of course, this is key, exchanging with peers, and this is what we're doing today in a webinar, also to exchange with the sector and with our peers about the trends, about the opportunities, and also the threats. Protecting, this is quite obvious. I mean, we want to make sure that the know-how and the business expertise can remain, and we'll see that there are some threats coming in, and the real question is, how do you turn that into opportunities, probably? And representing and monitoring, well, as I said, I mean, in monitoring, the scope of issues is very large, because when you work with data, at the moment you have to encompass all the data issues. So it goes from security to privacy to data cleaning, to making sure that you have accurate data too. So the number of issues that it takes at political and regulatory level is really high. And the representation, of course, this is the key point of any type of business federation. Uh, we've been doing that since the very beginning of the FIBISA existence. Okay, so that's in a nutshell what FIBIS is about. So today we're going to talk about the Open Data Directive and the latest evolution of that. So I've tried to organize the overview into three major parts. So first one is to give you a little bit of context, because when we talk about open data, it means a lot of things. And the latest act that Stefano, you mentioned, so the directive is the latest part of the overall journey. So I will bring you through this journey, trying to simplify it, but to explain also some steps, because it's important to have the context, and also to take into account what I call the bigger picture. So because as you probably know or may not know, if you're not familiar with EU law, uh, it's not in silo, right? The whole there is an overall environment and a bigger picture, and the Open Data Directive didn't come just like that. It has an overall context, which is also important to explain. Then we will look at what it means in terms of opportunities and implications for the credit and business information sector. And last but not least, in the third part, we've tried to flag out some of the most remaining issues, and some of them may be a little bit provocative. Some of them are more in terms of questions, and are not completely solved by the Open Data Directive, but they are raising more questions, and I think it could be an interesting discussion that we can have with the participants. Okay, so we can move to the next one. So if we start on the context, so if we move to this Genesis slide, as I called it, so first of all, the Open Data Directive is not completely new. It comes from an older regulatory instrument, let's say, which was called the PSI, Public Sector Information Directive. And the first PSI directive has been adopted by the European Union in 20 years ago, in 2003. So you see, it's not like it's not brand new. Of course, what was in the 203 directive and what's now is completely, well, has changed a lot, because the overall economic and global technological context has also changed a lot. 2003, internet was at the premises. You know, we were not talking about smartphone all that much. Artificial intelligence was probably in the limbo of some very intelligent minds, but not all over, you know, the media discussions. So it was a different thing. And there has been several revisions of the public sector information directives between 2003 and now, included in 2007 and 2013. And the last revision of the global Open Data Directive. So just to explain, the directive is one of the key EU legal instruments. You have three major instruments: a regulation, a directive, or a recommendation. And the directive is what is usually more chosen by the EU, because it has a set of common principles at EU level, but then it needs to be transposed or translated, if you want, into national law of all the EU countries. So for if we take the Italian example, a directive means that there needs to be a law before the Italian Parliament and the Italian Ministry in order to take effect, right? And this Open Data Directive, the latest big revision took place in 2019, and it is based on a very easy principle. The principle is that public and publicly funded data should be available for reuse for commercial and non-commercial purposes. So what it means is that if the taxpayer have contributed and if there is data, that's coming, that's been used by public bodies or bodies that are funded by public funds, so with taxpayer money, then the data that comes out of that should be available for reuse, and not only for non-commercial but for commercial purposes. And in this Open Data Directive of 2019, there were, of course, a lot of articles and provisions, but one of them it is of particular interest for us. It's the Article 14, which set up 6 categories of what they call the high-value data sets. And for these high-value data sets, the Commission has a mandate given by the directive to adopt what they call an implementing act in order to set up the specifics of these data sets. And here we come to the High Value Dataset Implementing Act 138/2023, sorry. So the one we are talking about here, this is at the very, very end of the chain, if you want. And it's a more technical, let's say, act than the original Open Data Directive, because precisely there was this mandate to set up specific data sets for these 6 categories of high-value data sets. So we can move to the next one if you want. Again, don't hesitate if you want to interrupt us. So what's do these high-value data set means, and what are the categories and the major points? So There are 6 categories, as I said, and you can see them listed here. So geospatial, the Earth observation, the meteorological, the statistics, mobility, and the companies and company ownership category. So this is the one we're going to focus on, because of course it's the one that's most related to our sector of business information, financial information, and credit. And an important point also that is also enshrined into this EU piece of regulation is that what do they mean by high value data set? Why do they define a new terminology and call them high value data set? And the meaning of this high value data set is that they must be accessible for reuse, free of charge, and across EU within 16 months after the publication of the high value dataset regulation, so the 138 slash 2023 that we talk about. So this is important because it's not just for the sake of defining new categories and new. What the Open Data Directive means here is to say, look, for this particular categories, when we have defined the precise data set that we speak about, they have to be accessible for reuse free of charge and across EU. Across EU being one of the most important points, because don't forget you have the transposition into national laws, but it means that if one country, for example, doesn't have access at all to any type of basic item for company and company ownership information, this will have to change after the implementation of the high value dataset instrument. So that's really prompting to get more access to basic data information about companies and company ownership.
Just
Right?
one question I have, if I can.
Yes, sure.
How were the categories within the main and and broader type of data, so the 6 type of data defined? I mean, when I read companies and company ownership, belonging to this category, we can have a huge number of documents, information, data, pieces of data. So how was the process of exactly defining these subcategories hold in the commission or on at the level of those who wrote the directive, even because I know that by experience that not every country in the EU has the same regulations. So for example, talking about balance sheets, in some countries they are not public at all by law,
Yeah.
by tradition. In some other they are, in some other they are partially. So how was this process managed? Because I guess it was tough and very
Yes, it
difficult,
was.
technically speaking.
So it was a very challenging process, and we can talk about that in some of the next slides. By the way, if you move to one of the next one. It went so I mean, if we go to the impact, well, I'll talk about the impact afterwards, but it was a whole process, to define the categories and then to define the data sets. And in order to define precisely which data set should fall under these 6 categories by category, the Commission commissioned a study, and also they went around and asked for business experts or experts also from consumers and from different industry representatives to say which type of data they wanted to have. And you will see in one of my next slides, I think it's in 2 or 3 slides, the list of the final items that have been kept as the list of data sets that are falling under these categories. But it's been a trade-off. It's been a trade-off discussion. It has been a long discussion, because don't forget that the final Open Data Directive was from 2019, and we only got the implementing act defining precisely what type of data set are there in 2023.
Wow.
So we can make the count. Well, even if there was the COVID times, which a little bit posed off the thing, but 4 years just to really define precisely what they mean by high value data set, this is a long time, even for EU times, which are also very long. But you know, if we talk about the impact, and we'll come later on about the impact, schematically, I think there are two streams. The first one is, of course, goes with the all open data initiatives that we see everywhere, not only in Europe, but and the idea is to increase the possibility to reuse, to access some of the data that's currently kind of locked, and to expand the access and to increase the possibility to be reused. And for some countries, it can really mean increasing the possible data sets available for commercial and non-commercial reuse. But at the same time, at political level or at regulatory level, and especially in the European Union, we also see a trend of protecting more and more the data. And here, if you speak, for example, about the GDPR or about cybersecurity or the protection of trade secrets, there is also a trend to say, yes, data should be more available, but at the same time, it should be more protected with privacy, with the protection of some of the business secrets and so on. So we constantly have, as business information providers and any type of companies, I guess, constantly have to navigate between those two trends, right? On the one hand, you may get more access to some data, but on the other hand, some data can be also restricted because there are privacy implications, because there are security implications, or because there are some protection of trade secrets or business proprietary information here. So it's a balance. I think it's a balance, and I think this is what we try to figure out today is the balance going to shift in one sense or the other? I can't say that we're going to go 100% into completely open data and free data for everybody, but I think this is really a fine balance that we're trying to have. And by the way, this is a constant balance between those two trends. We are seeing that in almost all EU legislation at the moment. If you think about artificial intelligence, for example, there's also this balance about more access but more protection. So this is an important element to bear in mind. And if we move to the next one. Also to explain again, like the broader context of this high value data set and the Open Data Directive. And I'm sorry, I apologize in advance if this becomes a little bit too technical. I try to make it graphic and more, visual in order to avoid the legal jargon in here. But uh, this is a kind of representation of the data strategy and the data policies at EU level. So you see, it's a kind of temple or a house. I don't know how you you would see it, but the floor would be the EU data strategy. So very horizontal approach to say that data should be promoted, but also the European part should be promoted. So we should have European champions and not only rely on international players, but promote data sovereignty, for example, these kind of things. And then you have three pillars. The first one is about open data and public sector information. So here you see our high value datasets initiative. But there is also another one which is called ESAP, and ESAP stands for the European Single Access Platform. And the aim of ESAP is to enable better interconnection of public trade registers in Europe. And I'm saying public, this is important because the idea is to have a better interconnection from chambers of commerce information in Italy and trade register in Finland, for example, to try to make the connection a little bit better so cross-border information can flow. Then the second pillar that we have into this overall data strategy is about data governance. And here we fall with the new data regarding ESG, European Environment, Social and Governance. Sorry, so what's relating to the non-financial data or the extra financial data, which, as you all know, is a trend that's growing and growing, because more and more the investment community, and I'm sure Stefano, you can back that up with your companies too, is that the not only the financial metrics are being super important to decide on investments, but also the impact that the
Yes.
company has on environment, on social and governance. So this is another big pillar that's there. And then the third pillar that's kind of building the overall data strategy is the data management. And here you see, for example, the GDPR, so the Data Act, but also the Artificial Intelligence Act, and all these initiatives that are here in order to explain a little bit more how data can be managed. And the top, the ceiling of all that is the intention of the European Union to set up European data spaces. And here, the idea is to say, okay, we have these bases, we have the principles and the pillars and the various policies which are horizontal by nature, but the idea is to come up with some specific data spaces by sector. So for example, a financial data space, but also a health data space, or any type of different sectorial data space, which will be based on the principles that come from the layers, so from the ceiling and the pillars, but will also have some additional requirements or specificities. So for our financial and credit sector, I think this is important to have that in mind, also to say the Open Data Directive is going to promote some of some new elements, but you also have some specific sectorial legislation that you have to deal with if you belong to the financial data space. So I thought it was important also to try to get this bigger picture. And in terms of organization of the EU institutions, when the tricky part is that even for horizontal approaches, this is done by vertical organization of the European Commission. So you need to have people who are from DG FISMA talking to people who are from DG Justice, because if you're talking about data privacy, but also financial information, then you need to connect the dots. So that's one of the key elements that us trade associations are trying to do.
And if I may add one thing, I lived in directly the deployment of the GDPR directive in a couple of European countries, and it was very important, I would say of paramount importance in there, to lean on local business information representative, because some rules were perfectly written in good faith, but then at the end of the day, when you broke it down to reality, they were not applicable unless
Exactly.
you went to unbearable costs. And that phase, I think, helped a lot to turn a good law in a good and applicable and realistic law. So my question is this phase in a way provided also for the Open Data Directive? Do you think we will go through this
Yeah.
phase of trial and error? Let me call it like this.
Yes, no, definitely. We are entering now into what I would call the implementation phase. So it means that every member state, every country needs to go to their relevant ministry, the relevant also members of parliament through a new vehicle. In order to find the specificity and the technicalities that can be applicable at national level, because you are really right. I mean, not all the countries have the same digitalization level, for example. So if you talk about and the open data and high value data set is a lot about digitalization, but if you compare, I don't know, for example, Bulgaria and Estonia, we know that the company information is not exactly digitized the same way. So we always, the EU always try to find the common denominator, but then in the like transposition phase, of course, it's super important to rely on the local player in order to find the right approach, as you say.
Thank you.
So
Good
yeah,
job.
no. Yeah, and just this is I'm not going to enter a lot into this description because it's also giving this very large picture, but it's just to show that it goes with the trend that we spoke about. If you remember this slide with the two impacts, with more data, but also more restrictions on privacy and so on. And here we've tried to flag out in a simple graph what types of initiative were pushing for more information regarding the publication of commercial information or for less. And you see here that Open Data and PSI is in the more column, but you also have to do that in accordance with GDPR or in accordance with the e-privacy. So the whole idea is to say there are some trends, there are some conflicting trends or some trends which sometimes are aligned, but sometimes are not that much aligned. And as you were saying, Stefano, the whole idea is at national level to find the common to find the commonalities and to come up with a law that's workable and that's practically workable. So we can move to the next one if you want. Yeah, and here it's just to explain a
Sorry.
little bit what I already said. Yes, what I already said before into the how did we decide on the final data sets, right? And the whole Phoebe's involvement has been through 2019 and 2023. So as said, the Commission decided that they would put up a working group on high value data sets and on open data, and Phoebus was part of that. So we made a lot of comments. But there were also some other bodies and other representatives who were there who were sometimes more trying to block or were not so keen on expanding the access to information. So it was a whole process, and it went from 2019 to 2023. So it really took some time. And I think what we have in the end is the common compromise, that the EU had to strike in order to find a balance between this openness of the data and the protection of some of the data that has to be here, especially after the GDPR adoption, right?
Yep.
So I don't know if there are some questions. I don't see
I
any
invite I
questions in
invite
the,
people to
yeah,
they're
yeah.
shy, maybe they haven't had coffee yet after lunch. So I invite
Exactly.
everyone who is participating in asking some question if this is the case. To me, it's quite clear the representation you have made, and I really like the parallel between having more and more data on one side, but that has to be balanced on the other side with more and more protection. And by the way, you participated into the works and commission. So do you have the feeling that elsewhere in the world such a sophisticated approach is being put in place or not?
Well, regarding the protection of data, what we can see is that the GDPR is acting a little bit as an example. The EU was the first one to adopt a comprehensive instrument on data protection. And if you look, for example, at Brazil or Singapore or other countries, even China, in a way, they're all pushing for privacy protection to adopt regulation that kind of mirrors the principles of the GDPR. The CCPA, you know, the Californian Act
Yes.
on consumer protection, is very much following the same principles of the GDPR with some adaptations, because of course the US is a different market. But I think the GDPR set a precedent, right, worldwide, and everybody suddenly realized that well, there was a need to better define what privacy was and to better protect some kind of privacy. The drawback of that is that it's quite understandable from a private person point of view. Let's say, to say that of course I want my data to be protected. I don't want I want to have the consent and the control, which is fair. When you come to company information, the balance has to be made also between protection and transparency, because yes, it can be fair to claim for protection of your data as a company, but if you are going to trade with other companies, they want to know that, and they have a legitimate right to know that you're a legit company, that you know, you're not you're not a fraudster or these kind of things. So commercial and economic transparency is also a key goal. And I think we are moving now into this, taking into account this other part. And we can see that some regions of the world have been traditionally much more pushing for, you know, commercial, well, economic transparency, let's say, or economic economic benefits much more than the privacy. And well, there are some cases that can be conflicting. So I think you know, the whole question regarding protection is not going to go away, especially if you take into account the artificial intelligence. I mean, we all know about the current discussions regarding, and some people are very afraid and having a very, you know, very strong protective speech on that. Uh, Even the regulation, it's kind of yes, I don't know how the AI Act, which sets really some precise rules, is going to work in practice, because we all know that one of the part of the AI is that it learns by itself, and you cannot control everything that the AI does. So, you know, if there are rules in place, but it's the AI who decides, then I don't know technically how it can work. So that's going to be interesting. But definitely what I can say also is that what the change that we have seen between the first open data or PSI directive in 2003 and 20 years later is that also the final users are much more interested in their data. They know that data is an important asset, and this is something that I think we all have to take into account.
Thank you very much. And just by adding one small thing, I think that operators, they do want protection, but in order to accept also the costs in terms of time and
Yes.
material that are connected, they want real protection. So people, what they do not like is that we have a huge and fair GDPR regulation, but then I personally receive eight phone calls on my mobile every day, and then none of them is. So I know that locally all the states are putting in place initiative to cope with this, but I think it's a pattern, no? It's a way, and the purpose is fine. So let me move on this. We are entering into the most I think important part of your job. So the impact and opportunities at the end of the day for the credit and business information sector now, which I think is well represented today, and so I think I'm very happy to leave you continue on this. So
Yeah.
please go on. And and good luck.
Okay, so thank you. I'm not aiming at all to bring, all-in-one key solutions. The idea is just to foster the discussion, I think. But yeah, so what trying to see what the impact and the opportunities can be for our sectors. So uh, the idea here is more to say that well, as you know, we explained. So there is this list of 6 categories. And the high value data sets that public sector bodies have to make available for reuse free of charge. And the why do the Commission think that they are high value data sets and they are of great interest? Because it's data that are interesting for value added services, but also because they have a benefit for society, the environment, or the economy at large. So it's not deciding suddenly that I want to have access to all the information about spatial, from the spatial sector, because suddenly I decide that it's important. It has to have a social or an environmental and economical large impact. So this is important also as a justification. And here we come back to our question of commercial transparency, economic transparency, which is a key goal um, of the European Union, because if you want to promote an internal market, then you need to have a free competition, a fair level playing field, and this kind of things. So that makes sense. The idea of the European Union with this high value dataset implementing act and with the Open Data Directive is not to limit to 6 categories. Over time, the new categories will be added. So I don't know when, and I don't know where, how precisely. But the idea behind that is really to say that it shouldn't be set in stone, and that the list is going to expand more and more. And depending also on the technological developments, then we are going to see new categories that can be added. In fact, the Commission is already working on a set of new categories, but because next year is an election year, and that probably there's going to be some change at the European Commission and in the European Parliament, they are not focusing that much on having that, out, but they've started to think of the possible new 6 or 7 categories that could be added in a second range.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I said that this one of the key elements is also to try to be as technologically neutral as possible. Taking into account the technological evolution, degree of digitalization, uh, also the sensitivity over certain aspects. So as I said, the ESG, the environment and social and governance approach are getting more and more important. So they will probably also, in a way, become added to these categories at a later stage. What's also important to bear in mind is that the dataset needs, so once the datasets are listed into one of these 6 categories, they have to be available with different, let's say, technological means. So first of all, it has to be in machine readable format. So it doesn't work if you just scan a photo of, of a balance sheet or an ID photo of a director. That won't work in machine readable. It has to be made available through machine readable format. Then the second point is also the data sets have to be available through APIs. And this is going to change a lot in some countries because, well, a large majority of EU countries are working with APIs, but some of the registers, the public registers, are still slow. Let's put it this way in promoting the full use of the API with all the related parts. So the possibility to have large downloads, the possibility to have have a relevant query on the data and this kind of things. So that's a second point that's also important important in the new rules. Then, where relevant, the data need also to be available as bulk download, and this is important for us in the company information sector because yeah, sometimes you need to have also access to pieces that are not completely digitized or done under machine readable format. For example, some of the statutes, if you're talking about an association, or then you may want to have access to the founding statutes. And well, it may not be, it may not fall under the various items that are in the data sets. So the bulk download possibility is also an important one. And then, last but not least, the fourth point that's stated here is that it's that we're talking at individual company level. So it's the granularity approach which is key. Of course, when you're doing business information, you want to have the information at the level of the business. But if you speak about big groups, then it's always important to set the exact level of granularity, right?
Just to underline
Mhm.
these last two bullet points, to me sounds like a title, no? Boosting and favors competition, because
Mm.
to this rule we can relate many business model, and we are a fintech company, so we really know a lot about this. So who is the subject of this? When we say that the data set will have to be available in machine readable format, that does it mean that every national public register will have to comply with this rule, or does it refer to distributors, sub-distributors? I mean, do we have an exact identification of who is the subject that will be at the first stage due to respect this new directive?
Yeah, the target of the High Value Implementing Act are the public bodies, and the publicly funded bodies, as said. So the target is to say any type of public body that is doing a register, be it for trade, for craftsmen, for example, these kind of things, um, should it should make available, sorry, the data in machine readable format. Of course, it's not going to happen overnight, and well, there comes the transposition process. And there is also a hidden question here, is that how are the public bodies going to be able to do this transformation? For some of them, it's a full transformation, and it's not a transformation that you do at no cost. So there are some in the back scene, let's say, discussion
A
about
lot.
cross subsidizing and how do you make sure that you can adapt to that. So, and that's one of the key points. I think we will allude to that in one of our next discussions points. But
Yeah, I really
is
like
free
actually
data
to.
is free data really the golden egg, right?
Yes, no, thank you, because this was the most difficult answer. I think it's we will know that by experience, and of course here we will have a lot of lobbying activity, and of course potential conflict of interest among states or within the same state among different players. But this is another issue, and I think
Yeah.
that the Commission will have to do really a great job to cope with this. Let me just one short point on time management. It's 3:23, and we are supposed to
Mhm.
stay connected until 4. And
Yeah.
I'm telling everybody that Stephanie and I will respect this deadline. And I would like to take then the last 15, 20 minutes to take a question, if
Yeah.
any, and then also to
Sure.
show a little study of impact on the Italian business information sector we did. So a little scenario just to provoke some reflections, of course. So that said, please
Yeah.
go on and
Yeah,
shall I
yeah.
move?
So yeah, you can move to the next one, and I think we'll go quicker on the. Yeah, I'm not gonna read all that because then you have it on the slide and you can have access to the presentation afterwards. But for the one important point here, the first bullet point is important in the phase we are in now because we are in transposition phase, right? And what the Commission is saying here is that member states can always go beyond what's written. So the high value data set is a kind of minimal data set. They can go beyond, right? If they are going to go beyond or not, this is another story, but you know, they are not, they can always go beyond that. And regarding the question of licenses, which was a very important discussion that took place during the, you know, this between 2019 and 2023 time span, the decision has been made to use the Creative Commons CC by 4 for the company or the ownership, company and company ownership information. So in the public body needs to also define the terms of use to the API. So as I said, you know, not only provide provide the access, but also how it works. And last but not least, this is an interesting point where probably we could do a survey in 2-3 years time, you know, when it's fully implemented, the quality of service criteria based on performance, capacity and availability. So there will be a kind of monitoring, you know, coming in afterwards to say, okay, you provide access, but if the access is only to, I don't know, 60% of the data set, then it's not matching what we want. So that yeah, I think that can be interesting in some years to really assess how it works on that. And also you have a point of contact. Well, this is pretty obvious, but it's also written in there. Okay, so we can move to the next one. Yeah, this is the most important one I wanted to show you. So when we speak about data sets, and you can see, you can find that in the implementing act itself, but I've extracted. So there are different types. So the basic company information, this is what the data set means. This is what high value data set means. So you know, the name of the company status, if it's still economically active or inactive. And I know this is a big issue in some countries, you know, just to know if the company is still active or not. Registration date, sorry, the office address, the legal form, the registration number, and the activities falling into the object of the company. You know, so NACE code, but it can be also another nomenclature. And then you have also the company documents and accounts, and this is, of course, very important for us also as business information. So the financial statement. And don't forget, you know, we go back to this machine readable format. So it's going to be a challenge for a number of bodies to make the financial statement available also in machine readable format, and not all the balance sheets are accessible in this kind of format. Then sorry, on the second point, you have the non-financial statement, and here we fall back on our, you know, is all the ESG information going to fall under this definition of the non-financial statement? The management report, when that's fine, but when you're talking about a very small company or a sole trader, there is no management report. So you know, where is this going to find? And then the annual financial reports, then we know that it comes from the accounting directive also in the EU, but again, the exact data set definition is going to take place at a national level for each of them, right?
I
If we
think
move
this is
to the
pretty
next,
much
yeah,
detailed. So I think
yes,
that's perfectly answered my previous question. It's quite detailed. There's no doubt about
yeah.
what is what in that list.
Yes, and you know, if we go to the kind of analysis of the strengths and opportunity, if we if we look at that list, for some countries it may be just minimal and it's not going to change anything about what's already available. For other countries, well, there are some things that are in this list which are going to change a lot, like I don't know, the status economically active or not, or getting access to non-financial information. So the approach is really interesting for that, to compare between all the countries. And if we try to do a very quick SWOT analysis, so one of the good strengths is that it's an harmonization. It's also going under FAIR principle and for access, but also the harmonization of the basic data sets available. The weakness is that it's a minimal harmonization. We try to push for more. And when I say we, it's all the business community. We try to push, for example, to get more access to information on directors or managers of companies. But here, what came back was the question, the conflict with privacy. And in order to avoid any type of conflicting discussions, anything that could be like GDPR tricky, let's say, was left, sorry, out of the scope. Uh, the opportunity, well, the opportunity is obviously you can expand the data sets that are available at national level for some countries, for sure. And also it's going to probably be easier to do some cross-border data comparison, because for companies that are active not only in one country, but in several countries, and I guess especially after the COVID, a lot of companies are really now having some cross-border activities. This is going to be a good element. The threats, well, the major threat is the free access to some of the basic data going to trigger a lot of competition to our business models. And of course, there's going to be some disruptive actors for sure, because when you open up, and you being a fintech, Stefano, you know that. I mean, when the open finance and the open banking regulation came in place and the PSD2, then suddenly, you know, it triggered a lot of new entrants, and well, the market can regulate itself, but there will be some new competition coming in. One of the key elements is also what's going to be the balance and the cooperation between public bodies and private bodies. And this will probably, you know, trigger some new partnerships or new discussions between public bodies and new actors. So that could be, you know, in a nutshell, what we can say about all that.
Thank you.
Then if we try to move, so, you know, we try to paint a picture about what it's changing, and with some clear view of the data sets involved, the bigger, you know, the larger picture and the different trends at stake. But I've tried here in the last part to try to sum up some of the key remaining questions, and sometimes it may sound a little bit conflicting, but the idea is more to provoke the, you know, the discussion, and to see if there are some things that we can all as a sector be promoting or not. So the first obvious question is this question of free data and quality data, and I know this is something we have heard in various countries, you know. If I take, for example, the example of the country where I live, France, there has been the open data regulation in France for quite some time now. And one of the key elements that we see after an implementation of the, you know, open data for company information is that, yes, it's very good to get access to for free to a lot of sorry, the basic data information, but you need to have access to good information. Because if you're getting access to information which is out of date, which is not, you know, cleared, if the access doesn't work real time, If you're experiencing a lot of technical issues when you try to download the data and so on, then what are you going to do as a data provider? You're going to rely also on alternative sources in order to make sure that you have a backup. So this whole idea of quality data is also a very important one. And the underlying question is, what is basic data, right? So we have some answers into the table, into the chart that we see, but it it's a very important one. And what is basic data? And the second question is, uh, what's not basic data is everything valuated data, therefore that can be charged for by us or by different actors. So you see here the question of the level of basic data is a very important one. On the quality, as I said, so frequency of updates, if you're getting access to information that's one month old, or 2 months old, or even 1 year old, what's the interest? What part of the database will be available under the high value dataset regime, and what part of the public database will also stay under previous existing access regime? This is because if you have two different types of access, or two different sets of, I don't know, control of the access, then it can be very tricky. uh, who controls the quality of the data submitted? This is a very important question, because companies and are submitting information, but there needs to be some data verification. And if suddenly, in the register, everybody can file the data and there's no clear verification that the data is legit, then you're going to fall with non-accurate data. So it should be, everybody's always saying that it should be the first party, so the public body, the register itself, that controls that the data is valid, because you have no means as a third party to interact on that. But concretely, how does it work? And it goes with the data mining, and then the API, the work of the API, the type of access, the type of technical discussion with the API.
Yeah.
Public bodies are not technological companies, right? So, well, first you have to have somebody who understands how an API works, and then you have to have somebody who can manage the API, and who can access that. So there are a lot of challenges here.
So I think this is going to be the
Yeah.
toughest issue that will be discussed during the
Yes.
next years, because it has a lot of subjectivity in evaluating that. And so I think you pointed out quite well the main components of it. Let me, if it's okay for you, move forward so that
Yeah.
we get
Sure.
close to.
Yeah. So we skip to the time. So yeah, I mean, the second big, like, not open question, but remaining question is the whole question between open data and personal data. We spoke about that before. We remember the slide with the two eggs and openness and protection. As I said, the open data makes it clear that for anything relating to personal data is GDPR. And in the EU, GDPR is kind of the Bible, right? You can't really touch GDPR. But GDPR is a very good text indeed, with a lot of description, but there are some gray zones in GDPR, as we know. And one of the biggest gray zones that we've seen is the question of sole entrepreneurs, because when I'm a sole trader and I'm having a business activity, but under my name, uh, is it personal information or is it business information? Not such an easy question, because the GDPR says that, if there is a personal identifier, then it's personal information. Yes, but when I'm doing that under the capacity of a business, under my business capacity, there should be a different thing. So in case of mixed data too, if you have personal and non-personal data, how do you separate, and how do you make sure that that it's anonymized in the proper way, or it can't be de-anonymized, and these kind of things. Then, sorry, you have the question also of GDPR is very good because it's protecting it's protecting the European citizens, and the European data subjects. But what about data transfers outside of the EU? And we all know, I'm not going to enter into the discussion with the the EU-US and the Privacy Shield discussion, but it's not ended yet. So how concretely can we manage that? And then, last but not least, the fourth point we spoke about, and I remember in the initial discussions we really talked a lot about this. Directors or managers are beneficial owners. I mean, are beneficial owners to be regarded as data subjects and therefore protected by the GDPR. And in that sense, I would encourage you, if you're not familiar with that, to go to the judgment of the European Court of Justice that happened in November last year on the question of access by the public of beneficial ownership registers. And this is really a clear example showing that the European Court of Justice decided that it was more important to protect let's say, the personal data of some beneficial owners, and therefore the public access to beneficial ownership registered should not be left, but only people with a legitimate interest in accessing this information on beneficial ownership should have the access. And therefore you fall back in the question, transparency versus protection. So again, an important element, because yes, it's very good to have access to more data and more data set, but if the data set is more empty because there's no information, because it's all the information is protected, then it may be an issue.
Yeah, thank you.
If you want to move to the next one, yeah, the value chain. I'll go quick, but for us, I think it's also an important point to bear in mind, because as trade business information, and we're all doing trade, so we have clients, we have suppliers, we all in a value chain. We're not as isolated, right? So how do you differentiate the value added services, and when you add the value to the data? This is sometimes it can be very easy to do, but sometimes it's very difficult. Um, then at the end of the credit chain, you have well, the credit managers and the credit buyers and the credit sellers. So what's going to be the impact for them? Are they going to access more information? But what type of information are they going to access? And how do you link that with the non-performing loans? For example, if you're a credit buyer or a credit seller, a very important subject also discussed at EU level at the moment. Again, the impact on trade credit. We all know that trade credit amounts for significant financial amount in all the EU member states. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 times the bank lending, and this is not very often publicized in any media or stuff. So if trade credit suddenly stops, then no EU company can do business. So again, what's going to be the impact that this Open Data Directive will have on that? Interesting thing to follow. Right?
Yeah, and in a few minutes I will have a very short example with some
Yeah.
numbers on these issues regarding the Italian market. So please
Yeah.
stay tuned for some more minutes, and I think this is.
Yeah, we can move to we can move. And the last one was about the fair level playing field. Well, we alluded to that in the first in the first part, but what is going to be the competition it will trigger with new entrants? Because if you open up the access, we all know from previous examples, like the open finance, like the telecom, for example, or if you take other sectors or the energy or whatever, when you open our access, then you trigger more competition, which is fine. But then in that case, there's going to be competition coming from private actors and also from public actors, because they will also need to subsidize in a way the transition to the whole digitalization of their own databases and stuff. So in that respect, another very important piece of legislation which is currently discussed at EU level is ASAP, and we spoke about that. So this is something we're following also very carefully, because ESAP is trying to say that to make a difference between low and high data reusers. So saying it's not the same thing if I, Stephanie, just want to consult something about one, I don't know, want to know the company information of my baker just around the street, or if I'm a business information provider and I'm downloading large, data at large, or if I'm a bank and I need to have access to information at large on a number of businesses, or it may be a different type of reuse. So we may end up in having, differentiated access depending on the type of reuse and the amount, let's say, of reuse that is made. And this will probably trigger also some questions about fees. And here we will enter into, the harsh game of discussion between how do you set up the fee, what is the marginal cost, what is the fair level, and we already see that it can be coming in some other countries. The Netherlands, for example, is currently having an example on that. So in a sense, I think this is opening up a lot of opportunities, but also raising a lot of questions. And we probably should be having another discussion in a few months or in a few
Be
years about
sure, be
the
sure,
yeah
be sure, be sure.
about the concrete status.
Of course, we will take the chance to call you back for another terrific presentation like this, which was, by the way, complete. I found it quite clear and explained. Personally, it's the first time I really managed to have a full comprehension of this directive. So I think you did a great job, and I think that
Thank you
everyone
very much.
shares my feelings. So thank you very much for this great presentation, and thank you to Fabis for collaborating with us. Now I invite you to get a last drop of coffee, because I would like to stay with you 5-10 more minutes, and having in mind all the details that Stephanie has provided us with, I would like to switch on to the possible impact of what she has perfectly pointed out, and try to understand what could it be, because as a player I see it more on the practical side. So let me just focus, and please, Stephanie, interrupt me whenever you want. I will take Italy as an example. No? So making public data available with a certain format, with a standard technology in APIs, etc., etc. First of all, if I look at our register, which I think, by the way, works quite well, we're talking about 6 million registered company, and 1 million annual accounts. So in this we can find many of the data categories Stephanie was pointing out before. So first of all, even at legal and public level, we're talking about a massive perimeter, and we are just mentioning one out of the 6 categories that you correctly pointed out in the presentation. So I'm not mentioning the other one, because I have no idea what could be in detail satellite information. So I leave it to another webinar with someone else. But first of all, we are talking about a paramount and huge part of the Italian economy, and therefore I think that in every country the situation would be pretty much the same. Every European country has a lot of companies and a lot of information. Then moving quickly on, what we've done for the Italian market, and we have tried to mark the perimeter of the business information sector. There are some SIC or NACE code that pretty much identify the sector, even if it is not mathematical that everybody within the same activity code exactly does the same job. But this is not the case, as we all know. But please just take this as a general reference. My objective is to stimulate some reasoning. No, in this case, we took some companies playing in the credit reporting services, which is defined TECO or SIC code. We're talking about more than 1 billion revenues if you refer to year 2021. As we know, that the sector has high margins, so very high margins. So I guess this is quite a potentially impactful directive, especially if well managed to them. And this is a type of player within the business information. And the second and sorry, this type of players, there are 4 huge players followed by a number of minor players. Here we can see the distribution. So you see there are 2 of them that have revenues greater than €500 million, and then you can see, Stephanie, all the distribution. You also have very small company that are interconnected with our national register, which is called Infocamera, and really works quite well, technologically speaking, with the system. So we're talking about a scattered and not uniform sector, but this is just one type of let me call it the business information profile. So probably in this type of profile, we both have a value added data and basic data. Okay, so we have both of them. Now I don't want to get into much technical detail. The sector is a growing one, so those companies, the same one, are belonging to this sector. Most of them, as you can see from this matrix, they are both growing in terms of margins, so profitability and revenues. I'm talking about 2021. We still don't have all the data regarding 22, but I can tell you that it's pretty much the same. So we're talking about a very flourished and a very healthy, in general terms, and powerful system, because those data are the engine of many banking decisions, credit decisions. So we're talking about, let me say, data that are much more important than their economic value. So because they are involved in many processes, which are key processes in a national economy. So 1.3 billion revenue. Then we had another type of business information provider, which is under a different code. This is regarding more company like a software platform which use in a different way. So that these ones, they do not basically sell reports. They use data massively, and they really build on data a complete different solution. I would say that in this case, I'm not saying that they are already compliant with the directive. I'm not saying that, but they don't sell even because they don't have the dimension, the size of the other bigger ones. So here we have 600 million euros. So summing the two, we are talking about a market of 2 billion in terms of their revenues, lower margins, a distribution more in this middle size company category. So we don't have giants. We have large company, but not giants inside here. And in this case, they are growing, but not in the same percentage as the one before. So we could, Stephanie, add much more company. I just picked quick and dirty two proxies of sector. Why am I doing this? Because I want to try to discuss the possible impact, and I find that what you said before, it was tremendously interesting and actual, because in one column we see that this is the the balance sheet, the profit and loss account summed up of the company belonging to the first, let's say, traditional business information sector, 1.3 billion, and secondly the other one. So here you see in the revenue, Stephanie, the 2 billions more or less in the revenue. And I mean, one question would be, who among these could be, even if it's early, I know, to say that the most affected, and I'm thinking of your metrics with threats and opportunities, and I think that there are for everyone, but basically here we have some companies which are very good in buying company information and selling and reselling the same information under many formats and as many times as they can, and they're doing an excellent job in doing that, because we also consider that maintaining data, it has a cost. No, it has a cost, and it is not easy. But look at the difference in terms of contribution margin: 62% against 34%, or 25% EBITDA against 6%. So the impact, I mean, if negative, could be that these are going to have a margin that are quite similar to this one. I don't know. It's an open discussion. Maybe they could also increase margin if they manage to use to be proactive on the directive. But this is a first issue. Another issue for you. So I'm just letting you a couple of bombs on the board. Sorry for that surprise. Is that we hanged around the European register, and you pointed this out perfectly before. We took the financial, the typical balance sheet, which when public is made available by the register itself. And as you can see here, we have dramatic differences among the cost, the original cost, because this is the cost that the register, the public source is practicing to the, I think, to the distributor. I mean, from 10 euros to 2.5 is a quarter. So what do you think will be the impact now, or at least do you think that the conflict, because this is going to generate, of course, business conflict and lobbying among between the states and within the same state among companies, how do you think the directive, which I think is great in the intention it has, will manage to cope with these huge differences and huge business models? If you can say a couple of words on that.
Yeah, I think, as you say, it's going to trigger more competition, that's for sure. And it's going to trigger a disruptive approach. So there will be some new entrants who are going to come because, you have free access to part of the data, and you can build up different business models and try to compile that maybe in another way. So definitely, I think there are some. There will be some changes in the way the access is done. Regarding the prices to access, this is there will be a need to leverage a little more, because it's going to be very difficult to maintain these price differences if at that level, with the Open Data Directive now saying that the basic data should be available for free. So this is really going to be different. I think one of the key elements is going to be a differentiation per usage, and so we will have more differentiation per usage. And also the key differentiator at business level is going to be how do you combine data? What do you do on data mining, and what type of data sources can you add that are not available as basic data, but that are, useful value added data, sorry, and that are going to be really really important for the whole community. And I don't know. I mean, the non-financial information, typically, this is something that's not really available at the moment, and the EU is suddenly realizing that they push for the corporate sustainability reporting directive, but technically, how do you get these data if it's not available? So this is probably one way to add more value to some reports. There could be some cross data mining and so on. And the quality. The third answer is the quality, because no matter what, yes, it's good to have access for free, but if the quality, if it's crappy data, let's say, then people are going to be ready to pay a little and get access to much more information. So competition, useful value-added services and cross data, like sets, and quality data, I would say. These are my three ways.
Well, that was more than clear. I don't want to bother you more with this uh, provocations, but I think, joking apart, it was very useful, even because this gives a touch of reality, which is well connected
Yeah.
to everything you explained to us. So I don't think personally, and now I'm talking as an entrepreneur, as an ex startupper, so a CEO of a fintech company, I don't think it's gonna be easy, but I think that that goes in the right direction, because at the end of the day, we are saying that the value added won't stay in data, but in the way you elaborate data, you make them
Exactly.
available, and so this is the real benefit that digitalization is going to bring, and I hope that every state will be keen on accepting that the rule are changing, and therefore competition. So that said, I think if there is any last question, we can take it. Otherwise, we close our webinar. It's 4 sharp, so we promised to respect 1 hour and a half, and we did it. So thank you very much to everybody that is listening, and that will be listening to the recorded version that will be spread through our social media. And again, Stephanie, it was a huge pleasure to have you here. Be sure that we're gonna go back on this maybe in 6 months, so we will see meanwhile what will be the stage of the huge job that this has started throughout Europe. So thank you very much for your support, for your information, and for your presentation. It was a pleasure, and I wish you the best for the future. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you very much, Stefano, and yeah, happy to be in touch. And thank you for all of you who listened. And well, see you soon. Have a very good end of the day. Bye bye.
Arrivederci. Ciao ciao.